highest regions for precipitation actually have about a 30% increased rate of eczema.
How much would you say that it actually, you mentioned the map before, how there's the northern area and the southern area. So in your research, have you found if there's a certain percentage that is higher compared to the southern areas?
So it's, again, and actually I'm going to even pull up the manuscript so I can even to take a look. In that manuscript, we published a few different things. So there's the actual, there's the prevalence of, so actually I should say there were a few papers that we published on this. One was looking at this exercise in atopic dermatitis. There was another one that also examined prevalences of hay fever as well. So seasonal allergies actually also follow a certain relationship with climate. So in the paper where we looked at the atopic dermatitis, we didn't publish any sort of maps, visual maps. We just sort of presented those tables about areas that are the highest sort of 25th percentile or the highest quartile of humidity, or highest UV index and things like that. And, in those areas that are the highest quartile, the highest, top 25% states of humidity, you have about a 20% reduction on the odds of getting eczema or having eczema. For the highest UV areas, you actually have the most sort of protective effect with an almost 30% reduction in the rates of eczema. With UV higher temperatures as well, some similar to to the humidity story, which is about a 20% reduction. And then for precipitation, the opposite. So the more precipitation, right, the highest regions for precipitation actually have about a 30% increased rate of eczema. So now you sort of have to go around the country because it's not, with climate in the U.S., it's not quite as simple as going, north to south or south to north in that respect. But from a climate perspective, you're talking about basically the top third of the country is going to be the coldest and driest with the least sun. And, the bottom third is going to be the hottest and the warmest with the most precipitation or most humidity and least precipitation that's keeping people indoors. And then, of course, it's in the middle is roughly in the middle. But it's when you look at the prevalence maps about what are the states that are most common for atopic dermatitis, you actually don't see it quite as neatly because there are other things that will drive high rates of eczema. So, for example, there's a fascinating association in the U.S. that African-American children have twice as the rate of eczema in childhood compared to Caucasian children. And that's a fact, and they have more severe disease as well. And this is a very tricky, finding. We don't really understand all of it. This may fit because there's racial and ethnic disparities in the U.S. that contribute to some of this. But because of those other types of findings that, the younger a child is, generally the higher the rates of eczema. There's these racial differences. There are gender differences. Well, all of that sort of gets kind of like swallowed up into the prevalence estimates across different states. So when you look at the overall prevalence map, what you'll find is that some of the highest prevalences are not always in the coldest areas, but they're sometimes in the areas that are the most urban, that have the most metropolitan areas, that have the most racial ethnic minorities. And so because of those differences, it's kind of hard to look at just a prevalence map and see that clear spread. But after you control for all of those factors, that's when you see this just perfect gradient of north to south.